Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of StreamTime Sports. My name is Chris Stone. I'm the community lead, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. Now, Nick, I'm particularly tired and particularly cranky this morning. We're at the point of the year where Bengals updates are going to be something that comes fast and quick every single week. Nick, it was a bit heartbreaking. 0-1 to start the season was a very ugly performance, but I stayed up late last night to watch the Bengals-Chiefs game. Obviously took quite a bit of time to fall asleep after kind of the letdown, but I think, I still feel positive despite being 0-2. It's nice, unlike the Premier League, where there's only so many points you can win. You just got to get to the playoffs, and then you can be Eli Manning, and anything can happen once you get there. But did you manage to catch the game, Nick, on Jamaican time?
I did. Well, it's a great time for me, middle of the day. So I'm definitely leaning into that. I'm getting more sports content than ever consumed at my house. So I watched the first three quarters, but I didn't get to watch the final quarter. And basically every time I see Burrows make a mistake, I think of you. So I hope that makes you feel any better. But he seems to be making more mistakes than needed at this time of year. But apparently their record at the start of the season is horrendous for the last 5-6 years. So I don't know. They need to get their ship in order to start the season off. That's for sure.
Yeah, their third season starting off 0-2. So I don't really know what's going on in the preseason. I don't know what they need to do to wake up on the right side of the bed. But at this point, you paid the man $250 million. So I guess you just got to trust that he's going to right the ship. It makes me think of the Aaron Rodgers interview. I don't know, Nick, if you remember, it must be about a decade ago, where the Packers started off not well, and he had the famous speech where he's like, RELAX, relax. So I think as Bengals fans, we just, have to learn to relax. But it was an epic battle, epic shootout. Good to see the Swifties on board. I don't even mind seeing Taylor Swift anymore, especially since Travis Kelce didn't really do anything. But we'll get there, Nick.
Well, I do feel like the trick or the uniqueness of the NFL, which is sometimes lost on people that aren't following it so closely, is it is only a 17 or 18 game season. So whilst you've got a couple of weeks to get by, almost every other sport that I can think of that I follow that is a team-based sport, you're talking 30, 40 matches that are being had in soccer or football. Basketball's 82, 156 for the baseball. Like, there's a lot of games. So you do, not to put the pressure on and to take the edge off there for you, Chris, but I do remember seeing some of the stats. If you start 1-3 or 0-4, you are in basically the playoffs are done. You can write them off and start planning for next year. So hopefully things turn the tide, because a happy Chris is a better environment for the StreamTime Sports podcast. That's for sure.
It is indeed, and we will come back to the NFL a little bit, given some of our guest who's going to be joining us today, and he'll be telling a very interesting story as well. So at this point, I would like to invite Sergio Lopes up on our virtual stage. Sergio is the co-founder of LiveMode, who's working with, or I guess created CazeTV, who will speak a little bit more about today. But Sergio, I guess we're going to use the really old saying, long-time listener, first-time caller. You mentioned, and you and I've exchanged multiple emails, so I believe you when you say it, that you listen to every podcast. You do it on Sunday mornings, where we get you so excited. You go to work out on a Sunday. So Sergio, you're joining us from Brazil, but thank you for being on today.
Well, great to be on the podcast. Quite an honor. I am a very frequent listener. Every Sunday morning at the gym, I'm listening to the StreamTime Sports podcast. So great to be here.
Well, like I said, I'm glad that we can motivate you to pump some iron. But Sergio, I guess where we want to kick things off with this, Nick and I were talking about this, just before we jumped on live with you, is we've never really quite had a guest be able to talk too much about Latin America, South America's marketplaces. And we will talk more about specifically some of the work that you're doing, but maybe just give people a bit of an idea who are perhaps coming from the American marketplace or the European marketplace, some of the key, determining, factors around Brazil in particular that you would say either aligns with what some of our audience is used to, and perhaps some of the things that are a little bit different. And Nick, are you ready to jump in?
Yeah, just before Sergio kicks off, I just think for our listeners to set the scene a little bit, it isn't just because Sergio is a listener that he's on the pod. We actually, out of some of all the businesses that we hear about in the industry, Chris, we've probably heard about CazeTV talked about behind the scenes in and around the industry as much as anyone over the last 12 months, because of their approach is really, really interesting in what they're doing with the alternate broadcast experience and in Brazil, and absolutely dominating. And actually YouTube really puts them as the pin-up for what can be done through their platform. So they have one of the most exciting and successful approaches that the industry needs to be following. So I want to set the scene there, because I think it's important that if listeners are tuning in and we haven't really given them enough insight as to why this podcast is worth a listen, I think we've got a lot to talk about here about both the Brazilian market, which I think is interesting, but indeed the approach is so unique and is being really turning into some great success, both in numbers and other stuff we're going to talk about as well, commercially as well. So they're setting the scene for you, Sergio. So now back to you.
Okay, well, guys, I'll try to share as much as I can here with all the listeners about what we see here and what perhaps can be transferred or also thought about in other markets. But just coming back to the original question from Chris, Brazil is a huge country, and a lot of things that I will talk about in Brazil can be expanded to Latin America. But football, soccer, fanatic continent. Brazil is a super fanatic country in terms of soccer, but also very attached to other sports. Olympics are very big in the country as well. So it's a country that is very connected to sports. This is the first characteristic that's very important. The second one is Brazil is a very media connected country. So people are used to watching a lot of free-to-air TV. Broadcast TV is huge in the country, huge presence. You basically talk to everyone in the country through broadcast TV. The reach is basically 100% of the population. Pay TV is still important in the country, but never reached a very high penetration. Streaming services took off well in Brazil, all of the streaming services. And of course, the free streaming platforms like YouTube have been huge in the country. If I'm not mistaken, Brazil is like the third largest market for YouTube in the world in terms of viewership. So essentially, you have a country where you have two aspects very interesting. So sports is very big, and consumption of media is very, very big. So this is what sets the scene for what we do here in Brazil as LiveMode. And I think it's interesting for me to talk a little bit about what we do, and then we get to CazeTV and why this is a big thing that's happening. Given the situation the landscape that I just drew for you of the country, we have a previous history, and when I say we, it's myself and Edgar Diniz. He's the co-founder of LiveMode with me. We have a previous history of having founded EI, Esporte Interativo, a former TV channel that was bought by Time Warner, is now TNT Sports in Brazil. It was a huge digital platform in the country. We built up the most engaged Facebook sports page in the world at the time. So we sold that business. We took some time off, and we looked at the sports landscape, live sports landscape, and we figured that the switch that was happening of advertising money and eyeballs from exclusively being on TV to a world that was now going to balance TV and digital was going to present a challenge for most of the sports entities, which was, how are we going to navigate this world that's now mixed? I'm going to have things on TV, but also live content on digital. And unlike in the US, where the sports entities or the leagues are actually media companies also, they're entertainment and media companies. In the rest of the world, especially in Latin America, they're not. They're purely sports political entities. So we decided to build up a company that was going to partner with these entities to find these new ways between TV and digital. And so we window rights, we essentially produce content, we deliver to the broadcasters, we do all of the marketing and branding aspect of the championships. But then when we got to the digital aspect of it, we tried many things in terms of live streaming championships on YouTube and other platforms. And what became clear to us was, first, the brands loved to have live sports on streaming platforms, because for them, this was a way to use sports as a brand safe environment, but also to be in the digital space where they also needed to build their brands and connect to the viewers. Second thing was, the viewers loved it. So we saw very good audiences at first. And then we thought, okay, so there's a potential here. And as we moved along, we decided to try to tailor the language, the form, the tone and manner of what we're doing to that particular audience. Because essentially, when we looked at our broadcasts on our streams on YouTube, they were essentially TV streams that were taken to the digital space. And it was not genuine. It was not really connected to the tone and manner that people were used to in the digital world. So we began trying out with influencers. And then I have to stop and tell a quick story, because Casimiro, who is our partner at CazeTV, was a former intern. He was a journalist that worked with us in our previous company. And we always thought he was a special guy. The way he talked about things and the way he engaged with sports, is a super sports fanatic guy. And so then during the pandemic, he began doing lives from his house, talking about different subjects, and sports was always there. So when we saw him and we saw our efforts to bring live sports to the streaming space, we thought we would try out these two things together. So we brought him over to do commentary on the live streams of sports. We were doing at the time the Brazilian Championship together with a club that had not sold their pay rights, the pay TV rights to the major broadcaster. So we were doing that on a paid form on digital. And then he came on and he just changed completely the way we talked about soccer live. And it lit up for us that this was a great opportunity. And right at that time, we were working with FIFA, hired by FIFA, to try to do something with their digital rights for the FIFA World Cup 2022 in Brazil. And we decided to put these two things together. We founded CazeTV. It became a channel on YouTube, and we brought the FIFA World Cup to YouTube with Casimiro, and he assembled his group of other influencers. We brought former players that had the same language and tone and manner. And when we streamed the FIFA 22 World Cup, it was a major hit. We were able to get 6 of the highest YouTube live streams ever in history, geo-blocked for Brazil, and we're competing with lives that were open for the entire world. We reached 6.9 million concurrents at the time in 48 million different devices watching us on YouTube. And most importantly, we found out that if we summed up the audience of CazeTV and the broadcast TV that was doing it free to air at the time, over the matches, we're building a new audience, because every match, the total audience was going up. So we began to realize that we were bringing new people to watch the World Cup on CazeTV. They were not watching it on broadcast, which for us was super surprising, because we thought all Brazilians watched the World Cup. But in effect, this was not true. We're bringing new audience onto the World Cup. And then when we dug a little deeper into that, we found out that there was a digital first audience of young people, essentially between 18 and 44 years old, but with a really core between 18 and 34 years old, that they woke up and they looked at social media and YouTube to see what was going on. They did not turn on the TV. And we got these guys to connect and watch the World Cup. So this was the start of it all. And this is how we found out that there was something there very different and very interesting.
So Sergio, I remember pretty well that moment where I saw there's a lot I want to dig into, right? But the tipping point the tipping point from our view, I guess, is, as say, like the more Western media industry looking towards different things happening in the industry, was the FIFA World Cup being brought into the CazeTV ecosystem. You said before you were hired by FIFA to do something with those rights. Were you acting as an agency as well on their behalf to try and sell those rights, and then actually you had these rights that weren't attracting enough interest, so you thought you'd do something with them that way? How did that all play out?
Yeah, we're working as an agency with FIFA to try to see how to best explore the digital rights. And one of the things that we're pitching to the platforms to social media platforms was that they should buy the rights and put an influencer to do it. But it got to a point where essentially we said, look, let's try to do it ourselves, because we're pitching this, and maybe if we do it ourselves, we'll build a case and we'll prove to everyone that this will work. So this is how it came about. We actually put together the FIFA 22 World Cup in 40 days. We had 40 days to set up studio, to set up all the broadcast facilities to do it.
So at the time, I remember this deal being announced. I think we definitely talked about it. It is unprecedented from what I can recall. I can't think of a situation where the rights have been exclusively given from FIFA's perspective to an alternative broadcast, let's call it for simple terms, than using it down the traditional approach. So it was quite an exciting deal that everyone started to follow. Was it successful from day one?
It was successful from day one, but there's one important thing. We had some objectives with FIFA at the time, and one of them was they had launched FIFA Plus. And we figured also that if we were successful in streaming the World Cup on YouTube, that would function as a funnel to convert people onto FIFA Plus. So what we did at the time was we did one match per day of the World Cup. And all of the matches were on FIFA Plus. And of course, all of the matches were on the major broadcast station for Brazil and all of the platforms, their pay TV channels, their streaming channel. They were doing that. But we were converting people to discover FIFA Plus, to find out about FIFA Plus. And Brazil was by far the country that had the most number of accesses to FIFA Plus because of what we did. Because we would do one match for the day, and we would refer the viewers to watch the other matches on FIFA Plus. So this was also very, very important for FIFA. And we could also prove that when you do free-to-air streaming broadcasts like we did, this can also function very well for you to convert to a paid service. In this case, FIFA Plus was not paid, but you could convert it to a paid service.
So just on that, how active was the content or the marketing, I suppose, of FIFA Plus in the content, in the streams themselves you were producing?
Super active. We actually set apart a package of media for FIFA Plus during the streams. So we had, we're always pointing to games on FIFA Plus. So we had on-screen elements. We had the announcers calling people to access FIFA Plus and subscribe to it, etc. So it was very active. And you asked about our relationship with the rights holders, and so that's something interesting that I also wanted to point out. So LiveMode, essentially, we work on behalf of the sports entities. So we work with FIFA, trying to find the best ways to distribute their content. We do that with the IOC now. We did that with the newly formed Brazilian league. We're doing it right now here in Brazil, Liga Forte União, which is the newly formed Brazilian league. We do it with Federação Paulista in Brazil. So CazeTV became a solution for the digital space that we offer to the rights holder, and we explore different business models with that.
So one thing you touched on there about the way you were able to drive people to FIFA Plus, you also just really quickly mentioned about driving people potentially to pay TV. Would you describe yourselves as complementary or competition to traditional broadcast? Where do you sit in terms of, we think about all the different spaces people can get from a media outlet where they can consume their content. How would you describe yourselves in terms of working with others?
Well, we think streaming, especially free streaming like we're doing with CazeTV, is super complementary to traditional TV and even to pay TV. We had a very interesting experiment of that happening during the Euros of this year, because we had half of the matches for the Euro and the final was non-exclusive. And then Global, which is the main broadcaster in Brazil, the main free-to-air in Brazil, they had the other half of the matches. And what we did during the matches at CazeTV is we promoted all of the competition and even pointed people to watch the matches on free-to-air. And when we looked at the audiences, we saw that our audience was very young and very digital first. And we have a very good sense that this audience was looking for the other games that were not broadcasting, also on free to air. So it's very complementary because we get the young audience that is not used to turning on the TV first thing in the morning, and we get them to engage with the competitions and then look for the competitions wherever they are. So I think we do great for the sport itself. We get more people, especially the young audience, again, that's very hard to reach, engaged in the competitions, and they will look for the competitions for the other games, the other matches, wherever they are.
So you're just wondering on let's stick on the competition or complementary point for a second. I'm curious, where is consumption split now? How much of it's mobile? How much of it is smart TV? How much of it is desktop or laptops? What's the rough mix there? Because that obviously can play a major factor in the way it's being consumed, and obviously how complementary, competitive it can be.
That's another great finding that we had throughout these almost 2 years that we've been doing CazeTV. Our first thought was, okay, people are going to watch, especially during the World Cup. I'll take that as an example. But now at the Olympics, it's the same thing. You have that available on broadcast TV, right? So people could just be using YouTube and CazeTV to watch on the go. But what we found out is that 55 to 60% of the consumption is on smart TVs, is on connected TVs. And then mobile is about 30%, and then there's a little bit on tablet. But so essentially, people are at home turning their big TV through YouTube on their main means of consumption of the live sport. What this told us is that people will look for the form that is more tailored to them, rather than I'll watch broadcast TV on a big screen because that's what I'm used to. Again, it's because of the young audience. So the young audience looks at the big screen and they don't see a linear TV. They see a way of consuming social media or videos on YouTube as a way of doing it.
So when you're launching this new approach effectively to live sports, and one of the things you set the scene on earlier was how you saw, I guess, consumer behavior change, but indeed what advertisers might be looking for in this new era of, say, media. How quick were you to be able to get advertisers on board, and how receptive were they? Or did you have to have more of a proof of concept to be able to get them to buy in and change the I guess the dynamic of some of those conversations with advertisers who probably, I guess a conversation would go from you knocking on their door and maybe getting a conversation with them to them all of a sudden knocking on your door very quickly to ask, how do we get involved?
Yes. We didn't know what to expect in that sense, but I think the advertisers understood very rapidly. And again, there's a complementarity between what happens on TV and what happens in digital. So if you're a sponsor of the Olympic Games, you set aside a budget for what you're going to do on TV and put some money there to activate your sponsorship, and then you set a money on the side to do something on digital. But the problem is, if you don't have the live stream on digital, you're going to be probably picking up influencers around and trying to see what kind of Olympic content they're producing, and go bit by bit trying to build up your digital strategy. What we bring to the table with CazeTV is a one-stop shop where you can actually have live streams of the sporting event, and then a super engaged fan page on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube Shorts, in all of the social media, because we're actually cutting bits and pieces of what we're doing on the live stream, posting it, and then adding on influencer made videos also to the social media. So in essence, it's a much easier strategy for the advertisers to complement what they're doing on broadcast TV, what they do with us at CazeTV.
So I've got a question, because it's a common sentiment that the audience that you're talking about, this younger generation, there's a fear for the future of live sports because they have short attention spans, because they're used to TikTok and YouTube Shorts, and there's no way that group is actually interested in watching a full 90-minute football match. you seem to be saying that's quite the opposite in terms of what your engagement numbers are. So for the people that have said that, yeah, that audience isn't, interested in watching a full football match, they'd rather just watch highlights, so that, I guess, what's the secret sauce? Because you're saying that you're seeing something different to that.
Well, I don't know if there's a secret sauce, but there's a challenge. Okay, so we got to face it is a challenge. But one of the things that we try to do is we try to switch. Instead of having a teenager or a young adult having their cell phone as their first screen, because this is what's really happening. People are on social media as their first screen, and then the football match as a second screen in the back. We're trying to bring the elements of social media and the language and the tone and manner onto the match, onto the game, onto the sports, and try to have that as really their first screen. I don't know if our audience will keep a 90-minute attention span during a football match, but I think we bring enough innovation during the match in the language and the way we tell the story that they will focus on the match many more times than they would if you were not doing anything different. And again, we're talking to the very young audience. So we hope, and our numbers show that we're doing it so far, we hope we're getting this young audience engaged in sports where the whole live sports ecosystem will benefit. Everyone will benefit from this. And I think during the Olympics, I think we really did this in Brazil. We ran some questionnaires during some surveys. We took surveys during our YouTube stream, and we asked people, are you watching this game for the first time? Are you watching this sports for the first time? And a lot of times we get answers, yes, this is the first time I'm watching the sports. This happened in the NFL. We streamed the NFL game that was played in Brazil with Eagles and Packers, and 33% of our audience was watching American football for the first time on CazeTV, for the first time. So we were bringing and we know that the audience was between 18 and 34 years old for the most part. So we're bringing a new audience for the sport. So we hope to be doing sports a great favor here of getting more of the young people engaged.
Sergio, on the NFL and the recent Packers game in particular, could you actually just explain what the broadcast experience was on it? Like, sort of give us a macro view of how the schedule of content kind of looks like, to give people a sense of what you're delivering or the programming looks like. Is it just people talking for a bit, a bit like you would see in a traditional broadcast, and then there's some live game, and then there's breaks where CazeTV comes to life? Is there alternative broadcasting through your own broadcast, your own commentary going through the entire experience? Just really, for those that haven't seen it yet, they can go take a look at the platform, but just talk through what is that experience actually like.
Okay. We're not totally reinventing the sports broadcasting, okay? What we're doing is we're talking about it in a different way. So essentially, we had a 2-hour pregame show referring specifically to the Eagles and Packers game. We did a 2-hour pregame show where we had Casimiro, Luis, our main announcer, and a lot of the people that were going to comment on the game on the field, doing very similar to what you see in the US with the major broadcasters. So we had all that there. But the way they were talking about the sport, it is as if you were in a pub talking to your friends about the sport. And that's why it's not for everyone. That's why it's a very young audience kind of a language. For example, we do use a little bit of swear words, too much. But that's the way people talk about it. That's really the way people talk about it. So we talked about how people were very happy to have the first NFL game in Brazil, and we talked a lot about that. We referred to ESPN. At that match, we referred to ESPN, and we talked a lot about their announcers and how they paved the way in Brazil for a match to be here. And we live thanked them for everything they've done for the sports in Brazil, and how we were happy to be arriving at American football at this match in the country. We had some of the medalists, of the Olympic medalists from Brazil, joining us. They were there for the game, They came, a gymnastic, a skateboarder. They came to stay with us and they talked American football. They asked questions about it. They didn't know exactly what the rules were. We explained to them the rules. So we made it it's very friendly. It's our audience feels like they are our friends. And you look at the chat on YouTube and they were chatting like they're chatting with friends. Hey, talk about this. Loved what you said. No, talk about that. So it's really the way we engage people in the sport from a very friendly perspective, very close perspective, very digital kind perspective that makes a difference.
In terms of, you mentioned the NFL's now got a deal. You just got back from the Olympics 3 weeks ago. It does seem like in quite a short time, you guys have managed to grab some of the largest sports properties around the globe. How much of that is necessarily, Nick was comparing or was talking about the advertisers, how quickly they got on board versus how quickly they started coming to you. Is that something you found similarly with some of these sports properties, going from, like I said, within 2 years to just launching to now, like I said, the Olympics and the NFL are, two massive ones. You had the Euros this summer. Like, how quickly has that process been for you, or how much easier are those conversations now?
Well, it was very fast. I mean, this is less than 2 years. We never thought we would have such a solution for the rights holders to connect to the young audiences and also bring possibilities for the advertisers to be on the digital space. This happened very fast. Conversations are much easier now. And all of the sports entities have realized that if they want to connect to the young audience, they need something like us, like what we're doing. And for Brazil, we really have a solution that works in that sense. We know that the advertisers are feeding back to the sports entities that they love the fact that they can buy a sponsorship, be a commercial partner of the sports entity, and activate it in Brazil through digital using CazeTV. And of course, in this form that I'm telling you about how we do things, activate promotions become very easy. We can get people engaged in promotions very, very easily, especially if it's a promotion to go watch a game or to travel to watch something. So I think we provide a great platform for activation that is feeding back also to the sports entities as something of high value.
Sergio, so one of the things about being, I guess, YouTube centric at the heart and soul of the offering and the CazeTV is that YouTube also talk a lot about the success you've had in various things I have seen them talk about. What are the parts that they're really selling or communicating, probably a better word than selling, communicating effectively to the sports industry now is how they're giving more tools to generate monetization of content, whether it be advertising placements in live stream, merchandising, pay-per-view, other sorts of things they're bringing to the table. Talk me through what you're seeing work from that point of view, which is allowing you to fund this approach. Because if it's obviously a lot of what we've talked about so far has mainly been around the sponsorship, the advertising component, which is, I think, still what I hear most people using YouTube is the main source of revenue. But are you able to generate more opportunities, more income, ways to fund this approach from other means that YouTube's enabling, or is it still early stages? I'm getting a mixed sense of messages when I talk to people about this.
Yeah, I think I think we're still in the early stages. Okay. YouTube is increasing the number of tools that they have for monetization. We do use some of them in the streams, in the live streams. We've used some of the overlays that they have that can be clicked. Dynamic ad insertions for the breaks. So during the break for between first and second half for football, we do dynamic ad insertions in some things. But we explore a lot what we can do in stream with the advertisers. And that's something that is quicker to try out when you're doing in stream. So the forms that will work the best, how the influencers, how Casimiro himself would be talking about the brands and how that integrates. So I think we're still in the early stages. That's still not clear. Now, one of the things that YouTube did, not on the monetization front, that was very, very interesting was the multi-view that they have for the Sunday tickets in the US, and that they put it out for the Olympic Games that we streamed here in Brazil. So the ability of watching up to 4 different screens and scrolling what audio you want out of the 4, and then double clicking and actually zooming in one of the 4 of the 4 screens if you want it, and then backtracking back to the split screen was a functionality that was very, very good. And we got a lot of very positive feedback around that. So for the user experience, that was very interesting.
So Sergio, just quickly, is that the tool putting the power in the hands of the viewer, or is that something that you're controlling from the production side? From my understanding of the Sunday Ticket example, is that the viewer is the one controlling most of that. Were you able to bring that experience into your feed?
It's actually both. At the end, is the viewer is controlling, so the viewer is scrolling. He selects the multi-view. He has 4 screens, and then he will navigate around the 4 screens. But we do an operation because we choose the 4 screens to be put up. And we actually had a separate operation just to do that during the Olympics. So, but at the end is to give the viewer the power.
Sure. Just on the final point there around the tools that you're able to use to try and fund this sort of a new way of consuming content. One of the things we've seen in the live streaming of gaming more generally is subscriptions and like the Twitch approach, which has been successful for them for some time, where people subscribe, even donate, et cetera, et cetera. Are you able to? Do you have anything like that in place where people can subscribe through the live stream to a more premium subscription offering, or is it largely what we've talked about so far?
No, we're still exploring how we can contribute to that. We're doing one of the things that we're doing in Brazil with CazeTV. It's not with YouTube, is with Amazon Prime Video. We're doing a production for that we stream on their platform for the Brazilian Championship, and you have to subscribe because it's a pay TV right, paywall right. So you subscribe through there, and we use YouTube as a top of the funnel kind of a thing for that. I think YouTube is developing better tools for subscription. Their prime time channel offering has not been rolled out in Brazil yet, so we haven't experienced that here. But we think generating revenue also through subscription will be important for the future of sports in the streaming space, just like it is very important for the TV space as well.
So switching more to a bit more of a general topic is around the idea of the alternative commentary. It's not as if this is something we haven't heard before. I referenced you've got the Manning cast that they're doing with the NFL production, but is there something you're maybe hearing from other people that they're hesitant, or is there a reason why this isn't become more widely adopted? Because with the story we're hearing from you over the last 2 years is how successful you guys have been. Is this something you continue to expect to grow? Is it something that's working in Brazil because of the market conditions? Like what scale do you think that this sort of approach could take?
That's interesting because we have some very large numbers of what we're doing during the 2 months that we had the Euro and the Olympics. We reached over 80 million different people in the country. Brazil is a 220 million people country. So it was large, but in essence, I think the alternative commentary, which is essentially what we do, we bring the social media language onto live sports. It's not for everyone, truly. We do something which we think is a lot of fun. We connect with the young audience. It's great. They love it. It super engages on social media. Just another number, we had 147 million people differently engaging with us on social media during these 2 months of the Euro and the Olympics. It's huge. But watching a full sports stream with an alternative commentary, very social media-like, maybe not for everyone, maybe not for the older audience. So that's why we think it's so complementary to have this form, CazeTV and traditional broadcasters. So these things go hand in hand. One of the things that I didn't mention that's very interesting that this alternative commentary allows is because we bring the public, the fans, so close to us. we did something during the Olympics, which was very, very big in Brazil. We decided that every time there was a Brazilian competing for a medal or we're doing a great effort, we would get the public to follow the social media page of that athlete. And we were able to drive 15 million additional followers to Brazilian athletes in the country. Now, the judo fighter that has the most number of followers in the world is a Brazilian lady that got the gold medal in the heavyweight. Bia Souza has now 3.4 million followers on Instagram because of the push that we did with the audience. So again, it's different. We're engaging and doing things in a different way. And it's not for everyone, and it's okay. Get people engaged in sports, and this is what matters.
I don't know about you, but I'd be pretty happy if I woke up the next day with a gold medal and another 3.5 million followers on my books. That's
and
for sure.
she had 30,000 followers before we did that. She jumped from 30,000. In 2 days, she reached 3.4 million. So it was incredible. And our impact is so huge. And I wanted to say something here which points a little bit towards the future, because I think it's interesting. At the beginning of this year, we brought a new partner for LiveMode. We have General Atlantic is now an investor in our company. And in XP, also a Brazilian investment firm. They both are investors. And because of this impact that we're creating in sports, we decided that we're going to be looking for sports properties global, starting in Brazil, but globally, and seeing how we can invest and become partners and take a lot of this that we're doing to increase the value of sports properties in different parts. So we're looking at, of course, soccer, football. We're looking at Olympic sports, and we're looking at some emerging sports. We have already made an investment in Brazil in that sense, and we'll be looking at other opportunities outside. Because what we're finding out is that we create such a big impact by connecting with the young audience and bringing the brands to this whole conversation, that there's an opportunity to really push some sports to a bigger place.
So Sergio, you mentioned with sports, I guess, are you looking through the same lens of what you did initially with FIFA, that type of relationship, where you get given, I guess, the opportunity to create something off the back of the gateway being open to having a premium set of assets that you can then bring to life? Because when you said that, I was thinking, well, I could see what that approach working with enabling other, in simple terms, other influencers with the scale perhaps that Casimiro had when he was getting into the thick of things, to be a launch pad to launch a similar proposition. But it sounds like you're looking at it through a different angle of like, it's almost sports first rather than the brand, the persona, the channel leading the direction of this possible opportunity, if that makes sense.
No, it is sports first, and then we'll bring on the layer of the different language and the form of doing this. But it's sports first. What our intention for the future is we're going to actually do equity investments in sports. So we'll become partners with sports entities and take a lot of this approach that we're doing with CazeTV, but also working with the sport itself to make it bigger in the world. So the advantage that we have is that we've done this here with, like, we're beginning to do this with NFL in Brazil. We're connecting the sport with a new audience and making it bigger. So we want to do this in other parts of the world as well.
So Sergio, I think that's a really interesting opportunity and proposition. Are you mainly looking for those partners to be international, but focused on the Brazilian market or the LATAM market, or really much more agnostic to anywhere that you see an opportunity in the market?
I think we're more agnostic to the opportunity. And of course, we know Brazil better. So, things will certainly, they have started here. We have an investment made, an equity investment made in Brazil. But we're very agnostic in terms of where the opportunity may be. We think sports that have a presence in many places in the world, in many countries, but also is strong in Brazil, would be something would be probably a first option for us.
I'm sure, no doubt, there'll be definitely some sports interested in a market of 200 million people to expand their interest and fan base. That's for sure. Just a couple quick questions before we wrap up. I had an interest on YouTube. We've talked a lot about YouTube and its role. Are there any other platforms playing a meaningful role for you, whether it be social media platforms or even your own owned and operated platforms you might be driving people to?
Okay, CazeTV is now present on Samsung TV Plus, which is their fast channel of the Samsung connected TVs. We are present on Amazon Prime Video as well as a channel there, as a channel on the basic offering. Is not a paid Prime channel, is just on the basic offering. And also Mercado Libre, Mercado Libre is the Amazon Prime Video or the Amazon competitor in LATAM, which also has their video platform. So we're distributing CazeTV in different forms in all of these platforms.
And is the distribution method basically, you said fast, so I'm assuming it's of a linear nature. It's basically it's providing mainly the live stream component of CazeTV.
Specifically on Samsung, because they have a linear feed, we actually do the live streams, and then we do reruns to fill up the 24-hour grid.
So I'm just curious on those conversations. How easy was it to work out an agreement with those platforms? Because would you find it a pretty straightforward conversation with like an Amazon Prime to get real estate on those platforms and with Samsung? Given your roots or your backbone isn't a traditional broadcast platform that they normally work with, did it take a long time to perhaps get on to Samsung TV?
Well, we did. I mean, our conversations began after the first year of having CazeTV to get it distributed over onto the other platforms. Of course, we need to reach a type of, there has to be an arrangement where everybody wins in this. So it took us a while. There is a technical cost of putting the channel there. And we would increase distribution for the advertisers, but at the same time, we would bring a lot of very prime content onto these platforms. So we had to negotiate a business model that took a while. And then at the beginning of this year, I think all of them began getting into place.
Well, congratulations. That is a great array of partners on board. And I think it really just takes, I think we need to start talking about CazeTV a little bit differently, in the fact that if you've got all these distribution channels, that it's certainly not, I use this in inverted commas, just a YouTube channel, because it's something that you are really reaching all key corners of the market in Brazil. So well done on that front.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's really interesting. And it does add an audience that's significant to the total audience that we have on CazeTV. And for the advertisers also is additional exposure. So it works out well.
Awesome. Well, Sergio, I appreciate you coming on. Incredibly interesting conversation. And yeah, hopefully, you'll continue to be a long-time listener to the StreamTime podcast as well. What do you got, Nick?
I was going to say, and obviously, if anyone wants to have a conversation with Sergio or reach out to Sergio, what's the best way to get in touch, Sergio?
It would be, you can shoot me an email. It's slopes, like slopes with an S at the end, SLOPES at livemode.com. So that's the best way to reach me.
Good stuff. Well, I'm sure us and everyone else will be following the journey and looking for any new exciting announcements to come out in the coming weeks and months and years. But really well done with everything you've done so far, Sergio.
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. It was great to be on the podcast. I hope the listeners will enjoy what we had to talk about here today.
Really well. Thank you, everybody.
Now, before you go, if you liked what you heard today, be sure to rate and review and just let me know what you think on social. You can find me on most social platforms as Sports Pro Nick. And please do spread the word of the podcast. There's no better way of marketing than word of mouth, whether that be in person or on social media. And if you don't like what you've heard, or you think we should be doing more or less of something, then reach out and let me know, as I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, StreamTimers. Until next time.